pleasure and relief to me that we're not here talking about the legality of the fiscal compact treaty or the ins and outs of whether the banking union is legal or not, or all these various commons debates that we have. And I've only been in this job for a year, but I could recite some of the speeches of the honourable, mainly gentlemen, on the other side, unfortunately. I hate to say it, Rob. Mind you, there is one on my side I could recite as well, but I won't go there. Now, in this spirit of cross-party thinking, I wanted to be critical of both my own party and of Robert's party, and to just say that in no general election has a party leader successfully used anti-Europeanism to win votes. So the first example of that is 1983. I wasn't active in politics at the time, but I'm told that we had the longest suicide note in history, the Labour Party, in which we promised to withdraw from the then common market. In 1983, we got our worst election result since the First World War. So, you know, not a good result for us. In 2001, and I won't lay this on thick given it's a criticism of your party, but in 2001, William Hague, in his former incarnation, before the Love-In, went around the country, backing the pound on his big battle bus. What good did it do him? No good at all. So, although there is an obsession by some parts of the media and by some members of Parliament, not all on Robert's side, mostly, but some on mine, about the constitutionality, about issues of sovereignty, issues polling shows that what people really care about is the economy, their jobs, health, education. Europe is always bottom of the list for good or for bad. That's the reality of it. So what will they vote on in the next general election in 2015? I don't think they'll be voting on the constitutionality of the fiscal compact treaty.
No.
So where does that leave us? Well, I wanted to say, again, in cross-party spirit, I'll be less cross-party in a minute, just in case you're worried about me, that on the very big questions, there is cross-party agreement between the leaders of our three parties. Firstly, that we should remain in. What that in means, we'll come to in a minute, but there is no party leader of the three party leaders in our country advocating that we withdraw from the European Union. There is no party leader advocating that we join the euro. And also, there is pretty much cross-party agreement on further extending the internal market and the fact that the internal market has been a great success in goods, but that it can be further improved. So, you know, on those three pretty big issues, there is cross-party agreement. Now, let me come to the critical bit, just because otherwise it's going to get boring. I have been, and we have been, critical of this government because, unfortunately, we feel that the Tory parties put the party interest before the national interest, and that the party management issues have overtaken decisions that should be taken to ensure that the UK maintains influence in Europe. What am I talking about? Last December, the walkout. We call it the walkout, we don't call it the veto, because I've already talked about the fiscal compact treaty, well, not in any length, but it went ahead without us. And I think that there is a great danger of the UK not being just in the second tier of a two-tier Europe, but unfortunately being almost in a tier of its own, right on the very margins if we're not careful. Because we know that the eurozone will have to integrate their economies more closely, and we agree on that, but that does bring risks in terms of UK influence. And we think at a time when there is a crisis in our closest trading partners, we should be constructive, not destructive. And I also wanted to say that some Eurosceptics, such as Liam Fox and others, think that the ambiguity of the government's commitment to Europe, or what they like to say as the ambiguity, and what is perceived as the ambiguity of the government's commitment to stay in the European Union, weakens, they say it strengthens our voice, but it actually weakens it, because our partners are saying, hold on a minute, we want to know whether you're in this for the medium to long term or not. If you're going to leave in 2, 3, 4 years' time, we're not going to invest that much in our relationship with you. And frankly, we're getting a bit impatient that you haven't made up your mind. So this is the message I'm receiving when I go to Berlin, when I go to Paris, when I go to Rome, and all the other places I have to visit. It's a hard life. But this is this is the message that I am receiving loud and clear. And I just wish that some of, and I hate to be political about this because I think, Robert said he's been to Berlin recently, and I think that's brilliant. I spoke to one of your colleagues yesterday, another Tory MP, another pro-European Tory MP who'd also been to Berlin. But I fear that some other MPs are not understanding the perspective of others enough. And I think we neglect sometimes in our own country. Yes, there's politics, and we've seen this tonight. There's politics between our own parties on all sorts of issues, but there's also domestic politics within other European countries. And we shouldn't underestimate that. And the moves towards greater integration, and yes, we want the eurozone to succeed, but we shouldn't underestimate the challenges that they face, and we should be constructive. Now, I know you've been listening to us for far too long. Let me just make a couple of points about the wider issue of our membership. I think it would be totally mad in a world in which globalization is increasing incredibly difficult and complex problems such as climate change, such as the movement of people, which in some cases can be a good thing, but brings with it its own challenges, such as helping the poorest countries, such as making sure we have an international financial system which is stable, not unstable. All of these problems can't be solved by individual countries just acting alone, especially not individual countries the size of our own. And actually, what's interesting about the European project is that other regions around the world are looking to Europe to see what works. And we have got many, many examples of what works. Take, for example, our cooperation, our agreements on how to combat climate change, and compare that to successive summits on trying to tackle climate change between other international actors. We've been much more successful on a European level. Take, for example, what Martin mentioned about tackling cross-border crime. The kind of cooperation that Europe has in tackling cross-border crime is looked at in awe around the world as a model for others to follow. And so to agree with my Tory colleague, we must take the long view. There are some great successes that we can look at. And my final point is, I wanted to, and I had a little, sorry, I've got a prompt. I was reading City AM this morning. I don't know if any of you read it. And I saw this ridiculous editorial, so I thought, I haven't written them a letter yet, so I thought I might share it with you, in which it says, Europe will become ever less relevant as century progresses. And the editor suggests that we choose the emerging economies rather than anchor ourselves to the sinking ship of the rest of Europe. I think that's a false choice. It's an argument I hear in the House of Commons all the time. But actually, if we are to compete internationally, globally, with economies the size and scale of China, India, Brazil, and others, we are much more powerful within a trading bloc of 500 million consumers, getting a better deal in terms of the terms of that agreement than we are alone. So this is a false choice. So in order to tackle those global challenges, in order to prosper, because growth in the world is coming from other quarters, unfortunately, not so much from Europe, but in order to harness those opportunities, we need to play a central role in the European Union. And I hope we don't go towards Brexit, and I think there is a danger of that. But I hope that people like yourselves, who may one day be in our parliament or other parliaments around the world, but in our parliament, will start having a much more sophisticated debate about and positive debate about our membership of the European Union than, unfortunately, we currently do. Thank you.